Hello, today I'm going to give my thoughts on Gnosis and the wrath of the Demiurge. I'm not going to go deeply into all of the details of Gnosticism here. If you want to know more about it, you can check out my playlist, and I talk a lot about different facets of it there. This is a bit of a more advanced video, I guess, so if you don't know anything about Gnosticism, maybe you should click away from this video. But for those that know some or a lot, I'm just going to briefly talk about what Gnosis is. So the Gnostics believe that the material world was created by a lesser deity, the Demiurge, and that true enlightenment and salvation could be achieved through direct inner knowledge of the divine. This often involved the belief in a hidden, transcendent God distinct from the God of the material world. So in Greek, the word Gnosis means knowledge or understanding. In the Gospel of Truth, it's defined like this. Gnosis is the revelation of the divine mysteries. It is the inner, mystical knowledge that saves the soul from ignorance and brings it into the light of the true God. How do we see through this ignorance? Since the Demiurge lacks true divine wisdom and knowledge, Gnosis, he created a flawed material world that reflects his own imperfection. This world is full of suffering, decay, and death because it is made of corruptible matter and is separated from the spiritual realm of pure light and goodness. We contain a divine spark or soul, which is a fragment of the true transcendent God, the monad, the pleroma. So suffering happens because we are cut off from this transcendent God. It also happens because of our ignorance of that. So how do we discover Gnosis? How do we get there? Well, there are many things you can do. I'm going to lay those out first, and then there's a few questions I want to grapple with after. So first, know thyself. This is probably the most important thing. But this leads to strange avenues of learning, in my experience. The more that you know yourself, the more you pull yourself out of what is considered the status quo. And, there are results that happen, repercussions that happen because of that. Now, you could say those are two-sided. You get a certain amount of gnosis from understanding what you really are. You can also be removed from what is, let's say, normal. The second thing is to turn away from the worldly. This is easier said than done because we all live in this world. We grapple with this world every day. We have needs, we have desires, we have hungers, not just physically, but mentally. At least in my experience, the best you can hope for is to limit them. I'm not a monk, and I think even monks probably struggle with it, and I don't know, there are temptations everywhere. Certainly temptations that probably lead to suffering. Meditative practices or contemplation. The older I get, the more important I think this becomes. You can't really understand things unless you contemplate them deeply. I mean, you can read a book and you obviously get information from the book, but there are times where I've read a book 10 years ago and I have a eureka moment through me thinking about certain things where I suddenly understand what the person in the book was trying to say. And I think that only can happen through deep contemplation. Communion or mystical experience. I don't mean communion like a wafer. I mean communion like to commune with the universe. And, this could be done through psychedelics. There's many different avenues. Meditation, fasting, all these different things. And that leads me to the next one, prayer, fasting, or ritual. And I think these are definitely the ways to commune. I've done several fasts in the past, and they've taught me a great deal about my spiritual self. There's a video here on fasting. It's not just about the spiritual. This video is about the health benefits, all these other things. But the spiritual is one aspect. The next thing is studying the sacred texts or the esoteric knowledge. You know, the Nag Hammadi library, Hermetic alchemy, the magical corpus. Any of those things can help you gain gnosis. And I will also say this, that sometimes reading multiple texts will help you connect the dots. These different kind of writers or philosophers or mystics, you will see their name pop up in different authors' books. And after a while, you start, researching them or going down their rabbit holes, and you start seeing that it's it's something that most of the literature that has survived the ages, that's one thing it has in common, is these people are kind of grappling with existence. Often they're kind of drawing from each other's struggles. So you can learn a lot that way. Teachers, guides, knowers. It's good to gain gnosis through shared knowledge. That's one reason why I have this channel, is because I want to have kind of communion. If I can be someone that inspires people to look more deeply into these subjects, or if I can learn from my audience, I just think it can give me more opportunity to gain gnosis, more gnosis. Then there's awakening through suffering. Well, if a dog gets beat repeatedly, the dog will eventually have to make a decision. Will it submit or will it rebel? And I think that is a key component of gnosis. It's kind of a form of rebellion, because you just don't want to submit to that worldview of suffering, I guess. You want to transcend it somehow. Initiations, whether organized or personal, are also important. I have kind of had unofficially both. One time I was initiated was with a group of people, and then another time I actually think the universe lined up certain events to initiate me into a different sort of place. So I think both of those situations can be possible, and they both can help you see more clearly. And that's actually what it all comes down to, is perception, seeing through the illusions. And maybe this is the most important thing, really. You do it by becoming more awake, because you're basically asleep to that nature of yourself. And the more that you can awaken yourself, the more perceptive you become. The final way is anamnesis, or remembrance of past lives. Not everyone either believes this or can do this, but it is a profound way to wake up. And there are lots of instances where people have gone through this, myself included. But the problem with it, I think, which makes it a little different than a lot of these other ways, is that it's really hard to understand the meaning behind it. If you have an experience that brings these past memories back into your present, these kind of eternal memories, it's really hard to sort through those things, because they're kind of often abstract, or it's through like a dream or a vision or some kind of break in reality. And often that's not easy to digest mentally. Okay, so getting back to the idea of the dog, I think in life we're in a similar situation, and I think there just comes a time where you have to kind of opt out or stop kind of cooperating or allowing yourself to be dealt with that way. It's like not participating in it. It's kind of like in an abusive relationship. It's like cutting off the abuser. Most people that have been in a relationship know how difficult they are, but I think they're even harder when it's an abusive relationship. It's harder to leave that abuser, because you get like stuck in that cycle. And I feel like the Demiurge's illusion that has been created is kind of like that cycle. We're stuck in that cycle. Just kind of putting your foot down and saying, no, I'm rebelling against it, I think is a big leap. Just knowing that it exists is a huge eye-opener. because, you know, not that many people, in my experience, actually see the world through a Gnostic lens. One person that did is Philip K. Dick, who I've mentioned in this video. He went very deeply into the Gnostic ideology, and in his findings, he named this intelligent being, which we'd probably just call the monad, but he named it zebra because a zebra kind of camouflages itself in tall grass. So you can see it sometimes you can't. He was saying that zebra hides within the Demiurge's illusion, and sometimes we catch glimpses of it. It can protect us, sometimes it can shield us from the source of suffering, sometimes it awakens us. It is quietly working to restore truth, order, and divine insight to humanity. Zebra makes itself known through synchronicities, through divine interventions, or moments of revelation. What's actually funny is I was preparing the script for this video at my teaching job. I was on break, and I finished, and I was talking about zebra, typing in the script. I went into my class to teach, and I walk in there. One of my students had a giant stuffed animal of a zebra. I was like, I was totally like taken aback for a second, but then I was like, yeah, of course, yeah, that's right. That's how things work. Referring to zebra, Dick says it's a riddle that we don't take seriously. We're presented with a test. So if we pass, we're saved. But what does saved really mean? Saved in capital letters? I don't mean rescued from sin or punishment. I think what he's saying is escaping entrapment. Literally, zebra saves us from the Demiurge as a kind of salvation by helping us break free from false beliefs, institutions, systems of control. This could be religion, media, culture, societal norms or conditioning, our own limited awareness. But zebra is there to startle you, to wake you up. In a lot of religious texts, they say you ascend, right, to God or to heaven. But he was pointing out that it's not actually going up, it's going in. And when I read that, it blew my mind because it changes everything. It changes a lot of the texts, a lot of the Hermetic texts about the microcosm and macrocosm, changes the way you can view them. I think what he's getting at is that the more you go inside it, the more that zebra kind of pulls you in, the more the world as we know it, the illusion or delusion that the Demiurge is generating around us kind of breaks down, and we get closer to the divine, because the divine is everywhere. It's not up. It's not down, hell isn't down. This is basically hell. And when I say hell, I don't mean a punishment per se. I mean more like a confinement. It's a punishment, not a containment. And I feel like what we live in this realm is a containment. Yes, we suffer in it because it's faulty. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's evil. Whereas I think of hell as being evil, if something like that even exists. But anyway, I think it's like Dick said, it's going inside it, penetrating it. Having thought about that more, having contemplated that more, and this is one reason why I've made this video, there have been some questions that have bothered me. If you gain Gnosis, if you wake up, is it like the Matrix where you're suddenly targeted by agents? Now, if this is true, worrying about this creates more suffering. So in the Matrix, once they wake up and they have the thing in the back of their head, and their head shaved, and they're like, oh, what's going on? The kind of robot squid things are on them, or when the ship is not having its camouflage, they're on it, right? Or when they're in the actual Matrix, the Agent Smith and all them, they are on the rebellious, let's say. So is that like that in real life? If I am awakened to this, does the Demiurge know that? And will the Demiurge do something about that? And you could say that's kind of fear. And there are precedents for that. If you think of Jesus's life, that could be a precedent for that. The more awakened Jesus became, the more of a threat he became. And you could say he was just put on the cross by the kind of government machine. But, I mean, you could also look at it as if the government machine, the physical archons, not the spiritual archons, they were working for the Demiurge. You could say that. If you truly break out, does the Demiurge deliver wrath upon you? If it was in small doses, you could just think of it as bad luck, maybe. But if those things keep happening, then you're like, is there more to this? Is the universe working against me? That's something to consider. More suffering energy. And that's a weird place to be in, because then you're thinking, well, if I don't think that, if I kind of detach myself from that, then does the Demiurge have no power over me? But I still have a physical body. I still have pain. I still have things that I might have to go through, right? And if you're having similar thoughts as I'm having, you might have also thought of this. So thinking about this has made me assess my actions, my needs, the world at large, things that might happen to me. And maybe this is even delving a little bit into paranoia. I don't want to say that I'm a paranoid, but if you look at the Greek word paranoia, it comes from two roots. It comes from para, meaning beside or beyond, and it comes from noia, meaning nous, meaning mind or reason. So with that said, these other questions spring to mind. Does sacred gnosis lead to a place outside of reason, outside of mind? Do you actually go insane in relation to the profane world? The profane world, what I'm basically saying, is like the mundane world, or the illusion. Then there's this question. Does detachment from the material world mean we have to withdraw entirely from physical experience? Pleasure, consumption, excesses of any kind, they all lead to suffering in some way. So I'm not really sure how you're supposed to even live in this realm without doing that. You're going to cause suffering to someone, and suffering is going to happen to you. It's just a condition of this place. You know, some, like vegetarians, are always like, oh, I don't want to cause suffering to animals. But there's suffering to plants, too. They have a consciousness as well. So, like, you cannot live here as a biological entity without doing some kind of suffering on something. Let's say you attain gnosis when you're 30. Does that mean you have to deflect, stave off the archons, demiurge for 40 or 50 more years before you finally are allowed to leave this realm? These are all, questions I haven't really come up with an answer for. I've thought about them quite a lot. I don't know. If you have any thoughts on this or answers to these questions, something that I'm missing, some text that talks about it, or, how to deal with it, let's say, you can comment below. But I'm going to leave this video a little open-ended because I don't really know how to wrap it up. But that's all I got. If you want to like, subscribe, you can share with someone that you think might benefit or be aided by this, or that you think might be able to help me, or at least put things into a clearer view. You can do that. But that's it. I will see you next time. Take care.